Guys, I'm Rob Dixon from the 304 Geeks. We would like to welcome you to HackerCon 3. Woo! Believe it or not, we are here, third year. I'm going to save you guys from just reading the program to you right now. Instead, I'll make announcements throughout the day in an effort to save a little time. First off, I want to welcome LarryPesce. He came in from where? Rhode Island, okay. You guys probably all know Larry pretty well. I'm going to let him do his own intro. That's standard hacker presentation. So guys, welcome LarryPesce.
I was smart, actually remember to turn the lavalier off before I, rustled it around and didn't make you guys deaf. All right, so the program says hacking survival, and sort of my take on hacking survival for you guys for a keynote was, so you want to compute post-apocalypse, rebuilding the internet at the end of the world. So we're going to talk a little bit about this here at HackerCon today. But first, let's tell you a little bit about me. For those of you who may not know a little bit about me, I'm a security consultant with NWN Corporation. We're probably the largest VAR you've never heard of because we suck at marketing. We have a small contingent team of penetration testers, vulnerability assessors, so that's what I do day in, day out. I break into people's stuff to tell them how I break into people's stuff, to quote the movie Sneakers, which when I tell that to people now, that's what I do. Have you seen the movie Sneakers? Most of them haven't because it's a 20-year-old movie, which I guess they need to remake it, okay? I'm a former network guy, so I used to do rack and stack networking, so I've got some networking experience behind me. I'm also a member of the Paul.com Security Weekly crew. Started a podcast almost 6 years ago talking about security stuff every week. I'm also a ham radio operator. My call sign is KB1TNF, otherwise known as Kevin Bacon 1, That's Not Funny. And I do want to give some credit to my good friend Darren Wigley, Rasmus21 on Twitter, helped me put this presentation together. We co-presented this at DerbyCon, but we've got some extra demos that sort of didn't work with two people and that type of stuff. So a little bit about my expertise sort of in this whole matter in doomsday and rebuilding the internet. I'm a pro, as what I tell my boss, as internet uptime testing. Yes, I surf the web a lot while at work, okay? So we make sure that the internet's up all day, okay? I love gadgets. I love all these little electronic things that plug in and maybe do various features, you name it. I'm also what I'd consider an amateur prepper. Sure, I've got some food in the basement. We're making preparations so when the world comes to an end, we can help our friends and neighbors. But I'm no means have my bug out location, and I'm going to bug out in place because that's what we can afford to do. And we don't have all of this crazy stuff going on, but we're getting started, and you have to start somewhere. So we're in the amateur phase at this point. Okay. The security community has made me paranoid just from a security perspective, as well as the sort of the end of the world scenario type of thing. Darren and I also run a new website called survivalnerds.com. And it's our sort of technology approach to survival post-apocalypse, applying the hacker spirit and sort of some technology to, having technology in a post-apocalyptic world and using the hacker spirit to use things in which the manner that they were not intended. All right, so enough about me. You guys want to hear about rebuilding the internet at the end of the world. Okay. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why we could have this end of the world scenario. It really doesn't matter which one you guys believe in or if you don't believe in one at all. But we're going to go down a path and we're going to illustrate a couple of them that we like and are very potential real scenarios. And we'll focus mostly on the last one because we feel that this last one that we'll address encompasses all of the potential issues from all the ones we'll deal with, as well as some unique things that you have to deal with in this one scenario, but will also encompass all of the others. Okay, so let's quickly go through some favorites. So instead of offending anyone by an act of God, we'll offend everyone by an act of the flying spaghetti monster. This is a religion I can get behind when you have prostitutes and beer in heaven. That works for me, especially the beer. So we may have an act of God or an act of the flying spaghetti monster. Zombies are always fun to think about, potential reality. Well, maybe not so much, but it's great fun. It gets folks thinking about, what happens when the zombies come, where is your food going to come from, and how do you defend yourself. Some more realistic type of stuff, financial collapse. Look at Rome's economy or Italy's economy. I'm sorry, Greece. So you look at those types of economy. Could something like that happen here? Will it get worse in Greece? Potentially. Okay. Governmental failure through one way or another. Will the government in Greece fail because of their financial issues? Are there other external effects such as military actions why governments may fail and some of your infrastructure goes away? And the last one that we're sort of taking into account when we start talking about rebuilding the internet at the end of the world is the electromagnetic pulse, so EMP. So at relatively low altitude with a fairly small nuclear capability, detonating in the atmosphere over middle of North America, from the best we can tell with computer models and government studies, will potentially effectively wipe out power and all sorts of electronic devices within a very large radius. Okay. So we'll get a little bit more into sort of the EMP design when we talk about rebuilding the internet at the end of the world. All right, so going through all this, yes, question? I honestly don't know. Relatively small. I mean, when I say relatively small, when we think about some of these new nuclear powers that are coming, they're not huge devices that they're looking to build. They're looking to start small. And even some of these new nuclear capability countries such as India have the potential to do this with one of their newer devices or their potential new devices. That's my understanding of it. Okay. So when we're starting to talk about this, the end of the world scenario, other issues, natural disasters, you name it, my real goal for this at the start is to reduce my burden on emergency services, because quite honestly, there are going to be folks in my area that have not prepared, they don't have extra food, they're going to come in, their cell phones don't work, emergency services are going to come in and they're going to need to help folks. Well, if I don't have to bother the emergency services folks because I can have my own communications and I have my own food, my own water, and I can have my own protection, then great. That's good. So that's really my ultimate goal for the beginning stages of this. In other cases, what happens if it goes really bad and they never show up? Well, great. I don't necessarily need to be reliant on them. And based on that, maybe we can find ways through all of this to improve life, protect our family. One of the things that we looked at when we start looking at all of this stuff is, how would have things been different in New Orleans in Katrina if we had been able to talk about some of this stuff and had it in place beforehand? And how could have we enabled state, local governments, law enforcement, and healthcare and healthcare workers and the Red Cross and all those types of things to have better communication when that happened. All right, so let's start taking a look at some of the sort of the hacker's perspective. Let's not turn those computers into bombs. That's not the intent, right? But there are a few tenets of sort of the preparedness movement that we look at, and to talk about those real quick. So 2 is 1, 1 is none. Okay, you guys familiar with sort of that mentality? If I've got one laptop and it breaks when I can't get a replacement, how many do I now have? None. Okay, so 1 is none. 2 is 1. So if I have 2 laptops, identical models, parts are interchangeable, and I can no longer get another laptop. They're not manufacturing them anymore because the plants in China have been blown up. Now I have 2, and one of them breaks. How many do I have? 1. It's really simple math, right? So 2 is 1, 1 is none. So have multiple of the same devices so that you have spares. Okay, fairly easy. Do more with less. Great, we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff now. We have a ready economy. We can go down to Walmart and buy all this stuff. What happens when Walmart goes away? We're going to need to find ways of coming up with devices, power, you name it, with less equipment, lower power, and all those types of things. Okay, and then the last one, the haves versus the have-nots. Well, this is great, Larry. You're going to talk about rebuilding the internet at the end of the world. You've got internet, and you've got food, and you might have some electricity of some sort. But those folks that are refugees that are walking down the street do not. So how do you talk about getting away with having some of that type of stuff and protecting those assets, whether it be through force or through disguise and operational security? So going through this, how can technology help us sort of with this end game with preparedness? So we'll touch upon some of that type of stuff as well. All right, so 2 is 1, 1 is none. Okay, having more of these items, redundancy, the Department of Redundancy department. Okay, the important things when we start looking at this from an EMP perspective is that we want to have these parts before we have this attack, because if your stuff is not in an EMP-proof cabinet, we'll talk about that. When that EMP goes off, and if you don't have the resources at your disposal protected, after that happens, after we have that disaster, good luck finding it. Okay? So, or good luck having it work after the fact. Okay? One of the things to note is when you're building these spares, if there are things in the community that you can use, think about the types of things in your community for community consensus. So two of the sort of examples that I give is that in New England, just about everyone drives a Jeep Grand Cherokee from 1998 onwards. You see them everywhere. It's like every third car on the road is a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I don't know why it is, but it is. So I'm looking for a vehicle that I can harden and do some other stuff with. Telling my wife it's the woods car, so that we can go pull stumps and put a plow on it and that type of stuff. But I'm looking for a Jeep Grand Cherokee because they're everywhere. Mine breaks down post-apocalypse. Guess what? That neighbor has one, that neighbor has one, and there's a highway full of them. The other one, too, is that when we start thinking about power, we live in Rhode Island. There's lots of bodies of water, name of the ocean, lots of boats that need batteries. So there's a large contingent of spare deep cycle marine batteries around. Woohoo, great. So when you're looking at doing one for the power just in general, consider what's available to you in your area. What do people buy that will be scattered throughout your local area? And in my area, it just happens to be that there's lots of deep cycle marine batteries. We're also susceptible to power outages, so there's lots of sealed lead acid batteries in UPSs all over the place. So this might also be advantageous to us as well. Okay. Some of this stuff doesn't always need to be expensive. eBay and Craigslist is your friend. And when you get some of this type of stuff, if we're talking about EMP type scenario, we need to make sure that we store them appropriately. And most importantly, take them out of the EMP cabinet and test them. And then put them back. And then 6 months later, test them again. You want to continue to make sure that this stuff works. All right, so technology and using this to potentially save lives and protect our family post-apocalypse. Okay? So the obvious, not necessarily a lot of electronic technology, but beans, bullets, and Band-Aids, food, medical, and weapons. Okay? Weapons could be considered technology. Maybe your laser scope isn't going to survive an EMP attack. Maybe you should store some of those appropriately. How do you cook your food now with a blender? Well, that might not work either. Think about all the medical things that we deal with that are electronic. Okay? But how about some additional type of things for saving lives? I look at this as, we turn the lights off tomorrow. Where does my world really end? Well, my world really ends as far as I can walk, at the end of the block, reasonably. So, short distance communications. Maybe we have some friends that are coming to meet with us, or the neighbors down at the end of the block. Great, we can get them a radio, and they can radio to us from the end of the block and say, hey, we just had this wave of refugees walk through, and some of them were armed, and they're headed your way. Okay? So some short distance communication, whether it be voice or other. Then after we expand our world past the end of the block, we find out that folks the block over, the town, the county, the state has some additional resources. We may be looking for long distance, more tactical communications. So we've set up a provisional government, and those provisional government forces are moving northward, those types of things, from a more regional perspective. Okay. From some other things that I think about, not attempting to be anti-government or anti-law enforcement, because they're there to help us in most of the cases. But most of the federal agencies that I'm aware of, and some state and local governments and agencies have standardized on encrypted radios using P25, Project 25, which some folks at DEF CON 2 years ago came up with a denial of service attack for. You can reprogram one of these IME pink pagers to do P25 denial of service. So great, go stick one of those on your front porch so that when they're coming to raid you, whether it be post-apocalyptic scenario or not, the Fed's radios no longer work. Makes their job that much more difficult and potentially potentially you can have some communications. Okay? Some of the other things that I like to think about, not necessarily from a tactical perspective, is that maybe over a little bit longer distance, you're looking to exchange maps that you've marked up for movement, where you have capability, exchange of medical information, ebooks. Obviously one of the other things you're going to want to do post-apocalypse is have some entertainment. Well, maybe we can find ways to make our Kindles still work. Okay. All right. Here's the EMP problem. Okay. So without a lot of testing, and you can't really do large-scale testing without setting off nukes over large bodies of land. So we're going with a lot of statistical models, and based on what researchers have told us what they've discovered. How many of you guys have seen the show, what's the one of the ones on the History Channel about the Doomsday Preppers, folks, where they go and take their stuff and put it in a metal trash can and they test it for EMP? Did you guys see how they tried to test for EMP? Completely ridiculous. Metal trash can, put the stuff inside the trash can, put the lid on, take a car battery, negative terminal on the trash can, then just walked around the trash can with the positive side. It made a bunch of sparks. Yep, did exactly that. It made a bunch of sparks. Didn't test for EMP, but that was apparently the dramatization. Very low level, yeah. I mean, not really a good test, right? But how do we test this stuff? Well, we set off a nuke. No, we don't want to do that. So we do the best we can with the knowledge we've got. So my advice to you is to build an EMP cabinet, or in my case, 2 or 3. It's essentially a metal box that's sealed, and by sealed, gaps, doors, those types of things are good. But for the most part, sealed, like a metal trash can, is good. The thing to note, make sure the inside of the cabinet isn't metal as well, so that you can have like parts that you're putting in there that are electronic touching the sides of the container. Because then that will basically bridge the connection inside the container to the devices you're looking to protect. In this picture here, the big black cabinet on the right is a metal storage cabinet. We actually painted the inside with truck bed liner, so no matter if we stuff the thing full and it rubs up against the edge, there's no conductivity through. Some other great ones, I picked up metal filing cabinets at yard sales. I had a metal gun case, and the one way up on top there, the silver metal case, I think I picked that up at Home Depot, and it's metal and will certainly work. As much as little as doing wrapping your stuff in aluminum foil may work as well. Okay. The problem is with the EMP, it's instantaneous. If you've got anything connected to allegedly an 18-inch piece of wire or longer, when the EMP goes off, kiss it goodbye. Because the 18-inch length of wire acts as a radiating antenna and will just take all that energy, suck it right into the device, and poof, no worky. So disconnect your stuff from cables, put it in your EMP cabinet when you're not using it. Buy multiple. Yes, sir?
What about Wi-Fi antennas that go up and around, say, the monitor or the laptop?
Put it in your EMP cabinet, 18 inches of wire, essentially, or an 18-inch long potential trace on a board. That's good enough to do it. One may argue that in some of the cases, you don't even need wire to have the stuff get damaged because the traces on the board are so close together that the energy received is just going to melt it. So yeah, put it in your EMP cabinet when you're not using it. Yeah, easier said than done sometimes, and more expensive than can be for some of the stuff. But I'll talk to a little bit about some of the routes that I've taken and to reduce some of those expenses. Okay. Think about some of this other type of stuff when you take it out of the EMP cabinet, potentially post-apocalypse. Some of this stuff might be exposed to the elements. So when you think about some of this portable technology, consider weather considerations. And after the fact, if you're going to be mounting equipment, some waterproof gear, you will want to find the waterproof gear now and stock up. Because guess what? When the power is turned off, the factories in China aren't going to be making them, and/or how you're going to get them here. So stock up now. Okay. Great, we've got all this electronic gear. How the heck are we going to power it? Batteries. Well, how are you going to recharge them? Ooh, good question. All right, so what works for me may not work for you, but I looked at a bunch of the scenarios. Great, we can get power from a generator. Okay, what type and how much? What type of fuel are you going to use? Does it make a lot of noise? How are you going to secure that? Operate with some operational security? How are you going to prevent folks from knowing that it's running? Okay. How about wind power? Is it windy where you live? Not where I live, so it wasn't an option. There's lots of moving parts that can fail, so now you have to buy extra moving parts. And when I looked at some of the wind power options, the startup costs were relatively expensive, and you've got to have spare parts, and it's moving and it breaks, and Hope you have wind and all that good stuff. However, the sun is free. Okay? Sun's mostly always going to be there, hopefully. So this is sort of the way that I went. Great, it's quiet. It doesn't make a sound. But how sunny is it? Is a cloudy day? Do you have enough battery reserve to make up for those battery day for those not sunny days? This is a picture of my installation. There's one up here on the porch, much to my wife's displeasure, and 2 down on the ground. These were actually bought at Harbor Freight Tools, about $150 a piece. So relatively inexpensive. Okay? Again, the problem is that they're connected to longer than 18 inches of wire to a charge controller in the house. And guess what blows up? Charge controller. That's why there's 3 spares in the EMP cabinet. Right? Great, let that one blow up when the EMP goes off, and then we hook another one up, and then they launch another EMP, and then so on and so forth. Okay, so don't forget spare charge controllers in your EMP cabinet. Relatively inexpensive startup costs. So this setup here and 2 deep cycle marine batteries power all of my computers and all of my ham radio gear. So that all the computers for the ham radio gear, a mesh node, and all of my ham radio gear at home. And we'll do so for 3 or 4 days without sun. So not terribly expensive either. Okay, batteries. We're going to need to have batteries to store power, whether it be from wind, generator, solar, you name it. Think about some flexible charge controllers in the types of batteries that you can recharge, deep cycle marine batteries, seal lead acid. Potentially look at some DIY stuff. Figure out how you're going to get power back out of those batteries and to charge various devices. Certainly some DIY options are available here. Keep spare parts and battery-powered soldering iron in your EMP cabinet so you can build more. And this is a great opportunity post-crash to barter with other folks for services to recharge their devices. Hey, I've got this power. I made the decision to go buy the solar and have this battery bank, but guess what? I can recharge the batteries in your radios in exchange for food, beans, Band-Aids, and bullets. Something that I see as a good idea to have. Take a look at your various battery types. What's going to work for you? What's the community consensus? The sealed lead acid, automotive, marine, gel, deep cycle, you name it. All of these are going to need various charging methods. So my recommendation is start putting some of the stuff in your EMP cabinet so when those folks come to you and say, hey, you have power, can you recharge my battery from your 12-volt system? Yes, I can. Okay? And you can do some of this stuff relatively inexpensive. All right, so Larry, you talked to me about power and guns and all this type of stuff. So we know how to power. We know some reasons why, because, well, we like gadgets and we might be able to use this stuff to help protect life and family. We're going to sort of leave all the operational security type of stuff to you folks as when you're doing some of this install. So every scenario is going to be different. What's going to work for you. And we're going to go through this scenario. We're going to start small and give us the potential to get bigger. And I'm going to move a little fast on some of the stuff. I do want to give you guys a couple of quick demos if they work. The demo gods hopefully will be for me today. So we'll start small and eventually have the capability to get bigger. All right, so great. Let's go use some of this wires thing, like the copper hanging on all those poles that we've got to rebuild the internet. So the problem that we've got is a good portion of these wires on the poles nowadays is likely fiber, and we're going to have to drive that with some sort of optical gear, which has some fairly significant power requirements, and, well, that might not work out so well for us. Well, let's reuse the copper. Well, that's good. There's probably still some copper around. When I was in college, worked with a telephone guy who was an older guy in college 20 years ago. He was in his 60s. He was the guy that was single-handedly responsible, and a couple of other folks, for installing all of the copper in the town of Bristol, Rhode Island. The problem is that they installed it in like the 50s and the 60s, and he was there. He was the one that responsible for it. He could tell you all about it, but he's 85 now, and chances are if food and electricity starts going away, he's going to be one of the first people gone. So that expertise that we've got about that installation are likely gone. So great, we can figure it out, but you know what? It's probably going to take us a lot more time to figure some of the wiring out that are hanging on the poles than it will to do some other alternative technologies. And, well, if we're going to start figuring that stuff out hanging on the pole, we probably have better things to do, like trying to figure out how to start a garden. Okay? Okay. So it's old, not maintained, and the folks that are likely can help us might not exist anymore. So how about a phone patch? Sort of coming out of the CB radio mentality, and no CB operator ever looked like this, much to my dismay. So when times start to get tough, maybe we don't have local phone service in our area, we can use some of these local phone patches to get phone service to communicate with relatives out of our area. The problem is that maybe this local phone service isn't going to work where the phone patch is because it's fairly short distance. Great, it's probably not going to be far enough to be outside of the affected service area. We still have to find a public one because most of them are, quote, private, and well, maybe we can find ways around that, but then there's some more time. We can set our own up outside of the potentially affected service area on a different provider and all that type of stuff, but fairly expensive and for something that's likely going to fail fairly soon anyways. Okay, so maybe not a good idea. All right, so this is what one of the first humorous images that I got when I went to Google Image Search and said, who needs wires? Yeah, I got this guy. That's how they get the pictures for my presentations. Okay, so great, let's abandon this whole wire sort of potentially last mile thing. And well, maybe we don't, so let's think about it. And specifically, we're going to be talking about ham radio and commodity Wi-Fi gear. Okay, so yay, ham radio, right? Totally geeky sport, right? Okay, it's good fun. Yes, it does require a license for us to transmit from the FCC. Good. It's fairly easy to do. Go get your license, get your TAC at least, and we can start talking about some of the Wi-Fi capabilities you get. Go to do general, and then you can start doing high frequency stuff, HF, and you'll have a much better experience. The tests are really easy. Okay. The problem is the FCC requires a valid mailing address for you to, be within terms of your license. Well, that may want to be something that you're concerned about for blowing your OPSEC. Do you want the government to know where you are? And it's all publicly available. You can go to the FCC license website right now and go look up KB1TNF and get my home address. Okay, something to be concerned about? Maybe. The question that I said someone had argued with me that, Larry, we want to do all this stuff, that's great, but I don't want anybody to have a ham radio license. And my argument back, much later after I thought about it, was, well, that's great, but that gives the ability for folks to track me, gives the ability for the government to track me, whether it be through cameras or something. And my argument back to them would be, great, do you guys enjoy driving? Do you own cars? Yeah, you went and got your driver's license, right? You gave your information to the government. It's available in some shape or form to some limited people and gives options for people to track you, whether it be through cameras, reading license plates, because they know that car is tied to you. Okay, so great. We all got licenses to drive, and that wasn't a big deal. And I enjoy the privilege, actually, and I actually enjoy my ham radio license. And it gives me great capabilities to practice with now, so that when the FCC doesn't exist anymore, I can go, guess what? I have all the practice. Thanks for doing that, getting me the license, and now I can do all the things that you said I can't do. Okay? So when the power goes out, what is the FCC going to regulate? Really? Okay. Okay, and I'm not here to preach to you about everybody should go get their ham radio license. It's just an option, but it's some of the things that we've seen that will enable some of the technology. The ham radio community is very entrenched in the emergency communications and emergency preparedness communities, so some great bunch of folks to get involved with. Okay, and with great power comes great responsibility. All right, so great. The FCC or some other governmental agency, if you're looking this outside, we have to work within their rules and work within the rules now because they exist. These rules, however, set the stage for us to learn about what the limits of the technology are, gives us various use cases within a set of rules, and give us the need to understand some of the technology, why we're getting the license. They just don't want to hand a radio to someone and go, here, go, have fun, and then people get hurt. So some of those rules, the amateur service does not allow for encrypted communications. However, they do allow you to encrypt the message, which I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that means. Okay. The other one too is that they allow limited encoded communications. Yet some of the digital modes we'll be talking about are encoded communications. So you have to have sort of like an open specification, and yeah, I'm still trying to understand what this means as well. Okay. But think about what happens when we have all this technology that was mandated by FCC and some of these regulations, but what happens when the government agency is no longer around to deal with us and we can do what we want on top of these technologies? The thing is that if we start doing this now and use this stuff, we'll have practice using it within the FCC's rules, but we can be thinking from sort of the hacker mentality of how can we make this better and how can we make this submit to our will after those rules go away. Okay. First up, we're going to need some gear. Okay. This is the part that can get expensive. Okay. Swap meets eBay and Craigslist is good. New is not always better. The two main ham radio rigs that I've got at home are from the early 90s. They were manufactured about 1990. They don't feature all the bells and whistles because I break bells and whistles. And well, I never read the manual, so I never figure out how to use all those bells and whistles. I just turn it on and go, right? Because that's what we do as computer folks. So those are good. Either one of those radios didn't cost me more than $250 a piece. Some of the add-ons cost a little bit more, and then we start talking about doing digital communications and more add-ons as well. Okay, and of course, the thought about this is 2 is 1, 1 is none. So have 2, have 1 in use, have 1 in your EMP cabinet, okay? Or have 3, 1 in use and 2 in your EMP cabinet. Okay, make sure that you swap these in and out. Some of the older equipment, the capacitors go. You need to make sure that they're working. Don't discount this whole boat anchor radio thing. So some of the stuff here pictured is some of the old boat anchor technology from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, all using vacuum tubes, which, woohoo, great, this stuff is really heavy and uses vacuum tubes. Vacuum tube technology stuff is allegedly EMP proof. Allegedly. Okay, yeah, now test it, right?
Higher tolerances.
Higher.
It can take a hell of a lot more pounding. You
Sure.
throw enough into anything till you blow it up.
Sure. So, you know, leaving this on your desk will probably be okay during an EMP attack, probably be okay, which is a really good thing because these things are called boat anchors for a reason, because when they don't work, you tie a rope to them and you can anchor your boat with them. They're heavy, and I don't want to be moving this thing in and out of my EMP cabinet all the time. Okay. Just be aware of some of these digital modes with the older equipment. You know, we're going to be doing transmit for signaling longer periods of time. The duty cycle on these was intended to be voice communications, sort of, and or Morse code. So you'll be careful, you know, using some of this type of stuff. Okay. Some more gear. Great. More radios equals more toys. Yeah, much to my wife's disappointment. This is not my car. This is actually a picture of the interior of a $300 Dodge Omni with about $25,000 worth of radio gear stuffed inside. Why, I don't know, because they could, I guess. But I like more toys. And if we think about doing communications, you know, right now, if I want to have communication with somebody at the end of the block, I've got to provide my neighbor a radio. So I've got to buy more radios. If we're start looking at some of the digital technology and looking to rebuild the internet, well, then I've got to potentially deploy a bunch of stuff all over the place. And that can be a problem as well. Okay? So you need to think about the capabilities and where you want them. Your LPOP probably doesn't need to have the ability to receive data, but a more centralized command location would. Okay? Think about some of these tactical positions at long ranges, maybe county borders, town borders, or even some state and local government folks. Okay? The interesting thing is that we're all part of this really great community. Now we can start talking about this, and well, we've got equipment spread out potentially all over the country. Let's come together as a community and see if we can start testing this stuff, because testing is part of a really good thing. Come together as a group. If we've got the capabilities, let's test with other folks, so now I don't have to buy a radio and ship it to my buddy in California. And well, guess what? Because I've got buddies in California. So, you know, building a community to start doing that stuff is good. And surprisingly enough, I've got LinkedIn for one of the communities listed. LinkedIn has a very active ham radio community and has a bunch of mailing lists around that. So they're actually pretty good. I guess it's something about really old folks liking LinkedIn. I don't get it. The other thing too is that when we think about gear, don't forget all that extra stuff. You know, batteries, wires, bits and bobs, electronics parts, you name it. Okay. Again, more practice. Ham radio community is great for this. Great, having this gear is great. Having this gear and knowing how to use it before you are in a survival mode situation is even better. buy it, put it on, figure it out, use it, talk with your friends, find some folks in the community to try to chat with, make some contacts, figure it all out beforehand, because you don't want to do it when you have other pressing things like, trying to shoot people coming on your lawn and figuring out how to grow tomatoes. Because you're going to need food, you're going to have more important things to do without trying to have to figure out how to work this radio. You're going to be worked to death as it is. Digital modes that we'll talk about rebuilding the internet, do require more gear, and you better know how to use it and set it up with a few moments' notice. Right? So one of the ham radio things is they do is field day, and you take your equipment and you bring it out to a field and you run it without grid power. And that's the thing, you have to take your equipment out of your ham radio shack or off your desk and go put it in the middle of the grass somewhere and use it. And they do this once a year, and you go take the stuff and you set it up somewhere else. So great practice for setting up some of your emergency communications gear. This picture is actually from one of our local ham radio gears, where I took my solar panel and my radios and provided everything for them for their field day event and had it set up in an hour. We weren't doing digital stuff. That's next year. Okay. Make sure when you're doing the stuff, set up your stuff in and out. Okay. Great. Protecting the gear some more, great. Here's the inside of my EMP cabinet. There isn't a lot in it in this particular shot. Disconnect your antennas when not in use, great for protection against lightning strikes. Make sure that you're swapping your gear in and out again. Okay? And you may want to consider waterproofing. Okay, great, Larry, you talked about ham radio stuff and you talked about all this other stuff. Where are the damn tubes? Where's my porn, right? All right, so we've preached about ham radio gear, ham radio tech gear, and some survival goodies, but how in the heck does this help me rebuild the internet? Okay, so we'll get to that. Let's start figuring out how we can use all this stuff to transfer data. Okay? Yes, the computer, and I'm convinced no one that ever used the interlude BBS back in the day ever looked like this either. Okay? So yeah, great. I get to surf the tubes with my computer that don't exist, so we have to build them. How about using this computer to surf the new tubes that we're going to build, right? Resources potentially all over the place. But why don't we use this to control the hardware that we're going to be using to rebuild it? And with the demo, we have time for that. Will work out pretty good. We can do ham radio rig control with software, tune channels. We can use it to decode some of this digital stuff, fairly low expense. And we can convert this audio to the computer and determine what the output of those tones are. Think the modem that we used to use. Same thing, but over some radio waves. Okay, so computer is the modem in this particular case, right? All right, again with the modem analogy, we're going to send some data. We need to convert that data to tones for various transmission. Same with the modem over the phone line that we did. Okay, the same issues apply. We've got limited bandwidth. We've got limited audio fidelity. We've got to find a way to deal with that and how far we go over distance and does it degrade. Okay, and so let's talk about some of the modes that we've got available to us. Okay, yeah, CW, good old Morse code. Yeah, it's a digital mode, right? It's got two states, a dit and a da. Binary have two states, right? 1 and a 0, yeah. Morse code is a digital transmission method. Now, we don't have to type all this stuff out by hand anymore, nor do you need to have Morse code to get your ham radio license, but we can get the computer that we're going to surf the tubes with to decode and encode Morse code for us. Awesome. Okay, all we need to do is read and type. The problem is that it's incredibly slow. You guys thought 300 baud was slow back in the day. A good Morse code person that can do 20 words a minute is about 16.5 baud. That's not a typo, 16.5 baud. That's significantly less than 300. Okay. If we want to do potentially binary data with Morse code, we've got some character set issues. There are a couple of characters that don't exist in the Morse code language. So trying to do base 64 encoded type of stuff isn't going to work for us because the character set's different. So there's no square brackets and no character or caret in Morse code. So sort of doing some UU encoding in base 64 stuff isn't going to work for us. But it's still great for simple text transfers. Great, think telegraph, email. Great. Easy to implement. We can do cyclical and scheduled broadcasts with limited hardware, and we can do, think less is more. We can do long distance with really small type of stuff. For example, this Morse code transmitter is built out of a tuna fish can and some parts. It does 5 watts, and you can do DX with this. So DX is the ability to do communications between foreign countries in a tuna can with 5 watts. That's pretty cool. I like that. All right, another digital mode, PSK31. Okay, another digital mode. It's been a little bit newer than Morse code. Started about 1998, which it's not your traditional da. It's a slight whistle with some warble type of stuff. Maybe we'll hear some in a little bit. Doesn't require a lot of bandwidth. Again, we talk about the whole audio fidelity thing and the bandwidth available to us. Again, all we need to do is read and type. Let's use the computer for this. Again, the problem is it's slow. It's called PSK31 for a reason, because it's 31 baud. Okay. Significantly slower than 300, right? There's no error correction, so if you've got an error in your transmission for this large block of binary data, kiss it goodbye, retransmit it again on your own. And they've got some unusual byte ordering and length, so it makes some conversion potentially tricky from a programming perspective. Okay, we do have the 128 character ASCII set, so we can do base 64 and UU encoding. Great, the problem is it's not good for really large critical blocks because of no error correction. Okay, we now need some tool for converting our binary blob into UU encoded data. We know how to do that and then copy and paste and have it wait forever. Might be good for some small transfers there. And again, with PSK31, we can also work long distances DX with as little as 5 watts. And it's very resistant to poor bandwidth conditions and noise interference and all that good type of stuff. Okay. We don't need a lot of equipment to do this. We've seen some folks start to implement a sound card and the audio coming from a radio on a Raspberry Pi. That's fairly low computing requirements. There's some issues with it still. The computing requirements are a little bit too high, but maybe we can take some of that out. And most of that is due to the fact that it's trying to populate this waterfall display and give you this nice graphical representation. And maybe we can do away with that and still do what we need to do. Okay. The QPSK variant of PSK does have some error correction, so that might be something that we may want to look at. Okay. Some other stuff. WinLink 2000, what do you do with email and attachments? Well, this might be really good. WinLink 2000 is free. The intent for the development of WinLink 2000 was, quote, remote internet, so a very high mountain retreat, a boat. So we can do radio, email, and with binary attachments to stations based on AX25. And we can run this over Wi-Fi and D-Star and all sorts of other different networks. It's all community-based, so it's community participation. You participate when you can. The problem is that if you want to participate, you need to have a WinLink 2000 node connected to the internet up 24/7. That's the way they like it. That's interesting. So trying to get into the community is hard. You've got to have it up 24/365. You've got to have some fairly substantial monetary investment to do this, but we can do WinLink 2000 in peer-to-peer mode. Here's where some community comes in. You can stand up your own station, not leave it 24/7, and communicate with folks on an ad hoc basis. But you need to know who you're going to do ad hoc with. From a survival scenario, you do your ad hoc transmissions. You schedule them every day at 3 p.m. We're going to do this, okay? Unless something else happens. We are going to spin up your WinLink 2000 stuff at 3 p.m. every day, and we're going to do a large net and do the transfer, and then we'll shut it all back down again. Okay? Don't need to have a special hardware modem for this, and it's an open source protocol. This was the open source solution to some of our other stuff that required expensive modems and all that good stuff. We could use it with the proprietary protocol, but it requires proprietary hardware, and as you noted sort of in this one, Pactor is the closed source version. Great. Disaster with folks got stuff all lined up on the sidewalk. Mobile HF rig and antenna, $1,200. Pactor 3 modem, $1,000 for a modem to do data. And the ability to send and receive email when communications systems fail, priceless. Yeah, now do this for the $1,200 instead of the $1,000 with WinLink 2000, because it's free and doesn't require anything specific for hardware. Okay. The other one too is that the Military Auxiliary Radio System, MARS, is thoroughly entrenched in WinLink 2000. So there's lots of folks that have experience out there already and still continue to use it. Next one up, packet radio. Woohoo, packet radio, awesome, great. I searched for packet radio on Google image search and I got this crazy Australian holding a bunch of TNCs for AX25 communications. We've got some better bandwidth, 9600 to 19.2. Again, specific hardware, expensive. We've got to do this for each node we want to do, but we can do better and cheaper, right? Do more with less. So how about we talk about some commodity gear? Okay, readily available, inexpensive. There's plenty of antennas and amplifiers and cables and all that stuff laying around and readily available for purchase on the internet. It's technology that everybody understands. Okay, how many of you guys have set up a wireless network, Wi-Fi network? I rest my case. Okay. Specifically, the stuff we'll talk about here is related to the Linksys WRT54G models and the L version, which is relevant to my interests, given that my friend Paul Asadorian from paul.com and I wrote the ultimate guide to hacking the Linksys router. Right, so relevant to my interests. All right, so one that we've seen is the HSM Mesh project. It's a customized firmware based on open source firmware for the Linksys WRT54G, a little bit older version, which is fine. But when you install this on your Linksys WRT54G, it creates a self-healing, self-routing mesh network. And we've actually got one set up here. There's a Linksys WRT54G underneath the podium, and there's one in the other room connected to the internet. So over the weekend, if you guys are local and you have one, and you want to hunt me down, I'll help you install one, and we'll join it to the mesh node, and you guys can get internet and get practice. So if you're local and you can find one or you have one, you want to do that, absolutely hunt me down. We'll get it installed, and we'll join you to the mesh here, just for fun. Okay. Power, not a problem. We've powered them with solar. No big deal. You power it up, you install the firmware, you give it some minor config, and you're off. It joins the mesh automatically. Okay. We can give it access to local computing resources. Great, we want to set up a web server. Great, we've got our computer that we're surfing the tubes with, set up a web server on it, and it plugs in Ethernet, and the wireless adapter essentially becomes your Linksys WRT54G. It carries all native IP traffic. We all understand IP traffic. All the rules of the internet apply, but without the wires that we've become accustomed to. Okay. So a little bit on the Wi-Fi with the HSM Mesh project. The SSID shows up as HSM-mesh. All of your devices need to have the same SSID to join the same mesh. It shows up as an ad hoc wireless network, and mesh nodes with the right OSLR key and the same SSID automatically join the wireless network. So that might be a security concern for you. Okay, but Larry, I know about Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is 1 watt indoor or 4 watt outdoors. Great, install them outdoors, use 4 watts. But okay, we can get better with that. Okay, we can use WEP or potentially WPA. Is allegedly okay by the FCC as part of securing the message, not the transmission. Okay, sure, do some more research on this, I'm not still sure. But we need to modify the HSM Mesh firmware to do that. Okay. So we mentioned with great responsibility comes great power. No, we said great power comes great responsibility, right? So you went and got your ham radio license. Even the first technician license grants you access to portions of the band plan that gives you responsibility and great power. Okay. So with your license, you have the ability to do some additional power increases in 2.4 gigahertz bands and 5.8. So some of those channels, channels 1 through 6 on 802.11b, with direct sequence spread spectrum fall in the amateur band allocation stuff. So you guys have additional rights here. You can do up to 10 watts. That's greater than 4, right? 10 is greater than 4, that's good. When you do all the channels for 802.11g and or all the channels for 802.11a, because they do not use direct sequence spread spectrum, they use orthogonal frequency division multiplexing, OFDM. They're not subject to the same rules, so that as a ham radio operator, you can do up to 1,500 watts. Ooh, now we're talking more power. Okay, now we can take this wireless network that we do pretty good with at 4 watts outdoors and make it 1,500 with some additional power requirements, of course, but we have the capability to do more power. So with some distance for stuff, some folks that developed the HSM mesh firmware out of Austin, they've done some great testing and enabled some emergency communication stuff. They've done up to 10 miles in some of their urban areas, and with clear line of sight, they've done between 79 and 134 miles. Now, granted, some of this stuff was on some towers and using 802.11b with 10 watts. So you want to do further, potentially think about standing up some towers now, finding places in high locations where you can do this, and go assemble some gear and put it in your EMP cabinet. Okay? And this will definitely get you past the end of your block. Okay. All right, don't forget your extras. If you're going to start looking at this stuff again, start stocking up now, because what happens if we have an EMP attack, well, tomorrow? And you say, well, great, now I'm going to go create this whole mesh network of Linksys WRT54G routers, and I'm going to go scavenge them out of people's homes. No, you're not, because they'll already be broken by EMP attack. Not everybody has the appropriate model routers in their house, and unfortunately, this is the only device that it works on at the moment. So stock up now. Fortunately for writing the book, I had a whole bunch. Okay. If you don't get it now, you'll be looking for it post-crash and searching house by house. Okay, and not many people in your neighborhood have, or even in your town, have those nice Wi-Fi antennas and amplifiers. So good idea to stock up on some of those now. Okay, we talked about having the computers, all that good stuff. We've talked about radios and the WRT54Gs. How about some computers? I'm a big fan of the netbook. Let's go get a netbook, low power. I like some of the Asus EPCs with 9-hour batteries, and they make 12-volt chargers for them. Awesome. And they will do everything that you want to do for ham radio stuff. Make sure you've got a whole bunch. Some other things to think about. Make sure that if you're going to do this whole computer thing, that you've got every piece of software that you ever will need. Great, you have a new machine that you're going to build. It's your hard drive died in the EMP cabinet, but you've got some spare hard drives in there as well. You swap it out and you go to do an install of Windows XP7, whichever you decide you want to use, and you go to install your ham radio gear, and your ham radio software says, hey, you need .NET 4.0. Oh, great, I'll just connect to the internet and get it. No, make sure you've got all your dependencies. Yeah, great. Patches, well, maybe not so much, but you're going to need to make sure that you go through the steps and you've got every piece of software you need backed up. And when I say backed up, 1 is none, not 2 is 1. So back it up to CD and back it up to DVD and multiple copies, because you know you're going to scratch. Because you're in the apocalypse, your house probably isn't going to be as clean. You're going to have dirt everywhere, and you're going to put it down on your desk, and you're going to scratch it. So have multiple copies. Have some on spinning disk, and well, spinning disk fail. So put some on flash drives until the first time you leave it in your pocket, and your wife does the laundry with the scrub thing, right? Or you do the laundry with the scrub thing. Let's not be sexist, right? I'll do the laundry too. So yeah, make sure you do this all over the place and do it multiple ways. Great. So we now potentially have a plan. We know some of the things that we need to do to start rebuilding the internet and why we'd want to do it. Now is sort of my call to action to you guys. Consider getting your ham radio license. At least start listening. You don't need a ham radio license to listen. Go get some gear. Get some practice using it. Okay. Figure out how to use it, set it up at moment's notice, and figure out operational procedures for now as well as after the fact, after the crash. How are you going to use it? Think about what times you may want to schedule WinLink peer-to-peer sessions. Okay, so how about some help? If we're going to do this, we have some potential lots of work to do. We need to potentially find deals on gear. Maybe we can do some group buys as a community. We're going to run into configuration issues. Not everyone's going to have Linksys WRT54GLs. I'm looking to work with the HSM Mesh folks and encourage you to as well to port the firmware to different devices. I'd really like them to just have a package that you can go and install, whether it be on Ubuntu, Debian, Windows, wherever it's appropriate, or on various firmwares that you go install. Great, you now have a mesh node. You don't necessarily need to install firmware. Finding like-minded folks for this type of stuff. I mean, you guys are here. You're probably some like-minded folks. We need to build some communities, so I'd encourage you to come over to survivalnerds.com. We've got a forum over at freeforums.net, and contribute ideas. Maybe we can get some community where we can set some times that they do ham radio nets in the community where they get a bunch of folks together and they talk. Well, let's maybe do a Survival Nerds PSK 31 net or something alike, so we all get some experience in seeing how far we can make some of this stuff work and how far we can push it. The other one too is that if you guys are interested in this type of stuff, we'll always take guest posts over at survivalnerds.com, and we'd love to have you guys to help us out as well. Okay. So that's what I've got. I'm going to give you a couple of demos and see if we can do this. I know this is probably going to fail pretty heartily, but just for fun, and we've got a couple of minutes left. I got here really early yesterday, and a huge thanks to the HackerCon crew. They helped me install this really large antenna in this room. You guys on this side of the room won't be able to see it, but underneath the podium, there's a car battery and my ham radio gear and a laptop. So that we could potentially do Morse code and PSK 31. Won't be able to do transmit because quite honestly, this antenna goes from this end of the room all the way down and wraps around. And quite honestly, you guys are way too close. I don't want to cook anybody's brain, so we're not going to do transmit. Receive only is absolutely fine. So see if we can see any signals out there so you guys can see what it looks like, how easy it is to decode. And yeah, I put this in a rolling bag, brought it with me on the plane, and it fits underneath the podium, and it's all mostly portable. Car battery was purchased yesterday because Larry screwed up. So let's see what we can do there. First one, we'll sort of go in backwards order here. I will remove this. We'll mirror the displays. We'll give you a peek at the HSM mesh node. So start right in the mesh node. Oh, it figures that's because I add the extra characters. Larry and his fat fingers. Okay, redirects to the status page. So this is connected to my local node. My IP address is 172.27.1.5. So 1.5 right here. My default gateway is .1. And default gateway up here, 172.27.1.1 on port 8080. We have a mesh node. It's sitting under the podium. For the other speakers, if you want internet access, I encourage you to grab this Ethernet cable and plug it in and see how it works for you. It's been up since yesterday. Yeah, went up system time, uptime, yep. Okay. Take a look at the mesh status. There is the other one in the other room, which is known as the route that's providing the gateway to the internet. Link quality is 73%, which is actually pretty good. And we can actually go surf over the mesh and check the status of the root node. So now we're actually on the root node. We browsed over the mesh, looking at that. We can take a look at the OSLR status. It uses standard OSLR daemon. So yeah, we can potentially use other devices with the correct OSLR key for exchanging information. So we can start building our own nodes. Should only be one route. Yep. So only one route currently because there's only two nodes on the network, the root and me. Okay? But yeah, good for demonstration purposes. We'll see if it actually works for us. So yep, mesh node actually comes up and work. And all right, Adrian, I'm going to mess with your video real quick, and I'm really short on time. So go for it. Rob's giving me the thumbs up. My netbook for my ham radio stuff. Let's see if we can make this work. All right, so right now, this is Ham Radio Deluxe. We're looking at Morse code decoding, bottom blue waterfall display. There's no audio going to it right now, but we're gonna see if we can fire up ham radio here, make sure the headphones are disconnected, and go through the 20-meter band and see if we can see any audio. And let me turn this up a little bit so maybe you guys can hear it too. I'm just going to sweep through the band and see if I hear anything. Lots of static. Of course, yesterday I had some in the afternoon. Now is not terribly optimal time for doing Morse code traffic, atmospheric noise. We had some audio stuff, more atmospheric noise. The aliens are coming. The neat thing, we can scratch. Not having a lot of luck. See, this is where the demo fail was going to happen. We are kind of in the basement of this building, and we put a ham radio antenna mostly underground. It doesn't work so well, but we figured we'd give it a shot and see what happens. I had another antenna behind the screen. It was less than optimal. Atmospheric noise. It likes to try to decode the atmospheric noise. All right, where are we here? Oh, we still got plenty of room to go. I had somebody early this morning. Of course, that's the interesting thing about it. It's all transient. You stay for as long as you want. You go when you're ready. All right, maybe now we can actually prove that it works. We're actually in the audio band. Sounds imperial to me. There's actually people there, but nobody was doing Morse code or PSK31 that we could find out. So the other option, potentially, maybe, Rob, we can run that cable over into the other room, and I can set up at one of the tables in the other room and see if we can do stuff next door throughout the rest of the weekend. So we'll go have some fun and see if we can make some voice contacts, and just for the hell of it. Okay. So that's all I've got for you guys. Thanks for having me come out. Hope you had fun. Hope you learned something. And again, would encourage you to start, see if we can join the community and see if we can find some other folks like-minded to start testing some of this stuff out. And have fun and be excellent to each other. If you've got anybody that wants to join the mesh, absolutely. I'm going to be here all weekend. I didn't just fly in for the keynote, and I'm getting the heck out of here. I leave at 5 o'clock on Sunday. So the con space isn't that big. Come find me. I'm pretty unique looking, and I'll help you set up a mesh node. We'll join it to the mesh here, and we'll be good to go. Check out the hsm-mesh.org website, and they've got a list of all the compatible hardware. And the WRT54 GLs, which probably a good portion of you guys have if you're local, work perfect. hsmm-mesh, mesh.org. Sure.
You're pretty friendly to your neighbors. Some people who talk about this sort of thing talk about fighting off their neighbors.
Yeah.
Is your opinion that you go ahead and form a confederation with your neighbors so that when it all
Sure. So yeah, the question is, you seem pretty friendly with your neighbors, and in fact, actually, we're not very friendly with our neighbors. We've lived in our house 11 years, and I can tell you the first name of the guy that lives next door. I talk to him over the fence like once a month when he's mowing the lawn. I just found out, we've been living there 11 years, that he has a bomb shelter in his yard. Oh, yes. Make friends with that guy. The other neighbors across the street, we've waved to them across the street. I've talked to them literally once. But the thing is that you're going to potentially need to make friends when it comes that time. And I'm of the opinion, I'm not a religious guy by any stretch of the imagination. You go into this whole prepper mentality that there's a lot of very religious folks, and their thought is that you should give to your friends and neighbors until it hurts. Well, I'm not a religious guy, but I still believe that I should be trying to help my friends and neighbors just because that's what I believe in. Maybe not so it hurts, but I still believe that I should be helping my friends and neighbors, and if I've got something that can help them, then maybe it's time to go talk, even if it's later rather than sooner. Just my thoughts. Any other questions? And again, I'll be here all weekend. Love to chat with all of you. All right. Okay. Thanks a lot.